So World of Warcraft has released the most underrated, as in under the radar update in my opinion, to their game, and that's Lorewalking. It's a game mode where you can revisit past storylines, in some cases up to the current period of time as well in the game, playing through a purpose-built, packaged content of quests, mixing in modern gameplay mechanics. It's made up of old quests, cutscenes, where gaps in lore are bridged together with new scenarios or gameplay-driven cutscenes so you can catch up with a particular storyline.
This tablet is a record of a battle from long ago, when the Black Empire ruled all. Eternally sealed. You shall only watch this world as it gains untold power without you.
Explain yourself first.
Such impatience. I believe you will find the answers you seek on the other side.
Farewell. I must warn you, friend. This is not a tale for the faint of heart. The Lich King. A figure so horrible that his very legacy defies remembrance.
Now, as an MMORPG player, I am mostly focused on endgame unless it's a brand new game, let's say that I'm playing, like New World, for example. When I played through that, I loved kind of just progressing through and leveling up to max level after about 100 hours. Then I kind of dropped off at the endgame. There's not a lot of casual content that spikes my interest. That early kind of dopamine of leveling up in an MMORPG, sure. But then after that, once I reach endgame, there isn't a lot of casual content that kind of like spikes my interest to play. But this pulled me straight in as a player who really struggles to connect the dots between lore when there are large gaps in time between story progression for a particular character or story arc, and really doesn't want to read up on the lore outside of the game or stitch together cutscene videos from different YouTube vids or having to read memoir cards and read it all in text format. No, in this case, I can play through and experience the main story snippets that the devs want to get across to me and enjoy it in a perfect mix of NPC interactions with modern gameplay or combat mechanics. World of Warcraft have released 3 of these in their most recent kind of major patch update. The first is focused on Xal'atath, who is the current lead villain in the War Within expansion. The second is based on the race of the Ethereals, one of the game's most enigmatic and otherworldly races that drift through the cosmos with a flair for profit and secrets. And the next season that's just about to be released in WoW has a strong link to this race where they're going to play an important role in the bigger picture of what Blizzard will be conveying through the new zone campaign, dungeon, and raid. I literally don't know anything else about them except that now after Lorewalking, I've been reminded that I did actually meet them back in a previous expansion, the Shadowlands, as they were quest givers linked to dungeons released at the time. Now I'm invested more into seeing and playing the next season and interacting with this race, having a deeper connection to them and the characteristics that come with being universal traders. And the third scenario, allowing you to play through key moments of the Lich King story, who is one of the most iconic characters in the World of Warcraft. So let's just touch back on that second scenario again, the Ethereals. Effectively, Blizzard are setting players up for the next season. They're setting me up for that next season to get more invested into what is going on with this race. How do they fit into the wider story arc? And they're really setting me up for the next season. Now, this gets me more attached to the game world and encourages me to play next season. Maybe I was thinking, oh, do I dabble in or not? Do I play it? I'm not sure. So yeah, endgame is my focus, but to be more connected to what's going on in my surrounding environment, that does entice me to go and check it out. And even at a minimum, play through that campaign, right? And see what's happening, see if the environment, the content keeps me attached to keep playing. Now, I don't raid, and a lot of the story does continue through that and has conclusions. But in this case, it does encourage you to go out, if you're not a raider, to go and do at least the story mode version that they've recently released, which I think is fantastic. It's a bit like what Destiny 2 have done in their exploration mode, but that's more just to kind of get people in to learning and entry-level kind of dungeons and raid mechanics. But yeah, World of Warcraft have effectively released like story modes of their raid to encourage players to at least be able to play through and conclude certain story arcs. And I may do that, or I definitely will do the story mode. But effectively, I'll go in, do the story mode, minimum, to check how the story progresses based on what I now know from the catch-up lore system. So why does this work so well in a game like World of Warcraft? Well, it's great for veteran players to stitch all the stuff together and maybe even get a nostalgic hit when they play through some old related stuff again. Meeting NPCs they've met in the past, a nice refresher, or finally, in my case, being able to actually bridge everything together in one playthrough. For newer players, it gives them the opportunity to catch up and experience a storyline from start to finish that goes across multiple expansions, and so it brings all of that together in a very nicely, tightly packaged piece of content. And it ultimately works well because World of Warcraft is mainly about the endgame, and so for new or returning players, you may have just missed out an entire season of content which kind of carried on that quest line. You may have missed an entire expansion that kick-started this particular character that they are continuing the story arc of. You may have missed key interlinking quests effectively. So, asking the questions, who the heck are these main NPCs all of a sudden? And what's their background? Where did they come from? What makes them so important to the outcome of the world of Azeroth? Well, this system lets them catch up whilst even leveling their characters, I think, maybe, getting XP. You can see Blizzard using this actually as a way for players to level up as well, whether that's new players or, a lot of their current systems do encourage you to check out and level up other classes, other alts. And so maybe this is a way of leveling up an alt, learning a new class whilst kind of experiencing, those story arcs again and reliving those previous stories. And that's an alternative to kind of what the main focal point is, which is kind of dungeon spamming or time walking dungeon spamming. Or just really weird isolated expansion playthroughs. So it really mitigates some of those issues there. Another reason why this is so needed, just to emphasize what I've kind of touched on so far, is because there is a huge break between lore parts for characters. And so it's nice to get a reminder of those key moments and set pieces that we need to know about to be more invested in those spotlighted characters of the current expansion or season. WoW revisits old characters or bridges them together in later expansions or seasons, so it works particularly well in WoW, where they also, just in general, strongly encourage to play multiple characters or to rush to endgame where the latest content is, and effectively fast-tracking to where the majority of the player base are. So having this system for World of Warcraft does make a lot of sense. Other MMORPGs will let you go and play through older content, without setting up a new character. You're rewarded for it. You play through with a friend. Maybe you've got level scaling and things like that, but it isn't the same thing. It's not a purpose-built kind of way of experiencing older content packaged together very purposefully in like a 3-hour segment, bridging together years worth of lore. Again, yes, this does work particularly well for older MMORPGs, but let's be real, most popular MMORPGs are the old ones, but even new ones, like once you get through all the way to the end game, there's nothing stopping them from having little, scenarios like this to play through and catch up before they release their next major patch. Now, as a avid RuneScape 3 player as well as old school, I do want to touch on that game. Old school RuneScape is ultimately one of the most popular MMORPGs in the world right now, and RS3 I think is still a fantastic game at its core, but it just has those overarching systems like MTX really weighing it down, but hopefully they are looking to improve that. But let's not focus on whether it's good or not. Let's just focus on the game and how it does its lore, and whether this would even work in a game like RuneScape. RuneScape, it has a huge emphasis on vertical linear progression with no real fast track mechanics to skip stories or quests. So you have to play through them anyway to unlock areas, new skilling methods, or new boss encounters. However, that can take thousands of hours until you do that, and it has the same issue as World of Warcraft, where there are huge gaps between lore progression with a particular character or storyline. I'm a 20+ year veteran of RuneScape, and I genuinely don't understand half of the lore in Gielinor, if not more. Gielinor is the world. I get individual quests, but by the time I play the next quest in that arc, I've completely forgotten what the heck was going on. This is where, a solo RPG, you play through it from start to finish, you conclude it, and then maybe you play through future DLCs that have a start, middle, and finish. MMORPGs are mostly about the systems, the game mechanics to keep you playing and interacting with other players, thousands, millions of other players across the world. and their stories are very scattered naturally, you know, picking back up on old stories because they want to revitalize it, or it makes sense to interlink to the wider arc, you know, that they're about to go into. And so, you know, there's nothing wrong. Naturally, they're going to have this issue. And now, WoW, now Blizzard have came up with this Lorewalking scenario gameplay system that kind of solves that problem. Now, back to RuneScape, there's a new group boss on the horizon called a Mascot. It's too late now for Jax to do anything for that, you know, probably. But for moments like this, it would be great to have a purpose-built playthrough of the Mascot lore from start to finish, with some extra content to bridge the gap, smash it together in about a 2 to 3 hour playthrough. You know, hey, RuneScape is much more difficult. You have a ton of requirements in order to do quests in the first place. I really don't know how the heck this would work in RuneScape. You know, it's not going to be easy for a game that has such vertical progression and everything is locked behind requirements in order to do them in the first place. So very, very difficult. You know, in RuneScape scenario, it probably only work for those veteran players who've got up to that point. And so, yeah, do they just release a new quest and bridge it together that way? Probably. You know, it is harder in a game like RS where they lock everything behind requirements. I mean, it's exceptionally difficult for new players or even returning players to know what's going on. They would have missed things out unless you're going for a completionist cape and you're going to put in another hundreds and hundreds of hours again to catch up. You know, I think a scenario could be thought up for RuneScape. You know, I think there's a lot of value in bridging lore together in this game. RuneScape has a brand new expansion coming out called Havenheith. You know, Jax planned that for RS3. It's coming out, you know, later this year, I believe, in stages. You know, are there any links to older lore here to set us up for that next zone and get us excited about it and understand what the heck's going on? Or is it a completely brand new zone with brand new characters and it has no link to the overarching story? I don't know. But, you know, any way in which they can get players more invested in the world and more immersed into that world is a good thing. But either way, like I said, for a game like RS with such vertical progression, similar to Final Fantasy as well, it's not going to be easy, you know, to implement something like what Blizzard have done for their game, where it's more of a theme park like MMO. So, you know, maybe Guild Wars 2 would find it easier, you know, to do this sort of thing. Those are my thoughts on this new game mode anyway. Let me know what you guys think to it in the comments. How could other games adopt this? What other games do something similar? I genuinely don't see many cons to this approach. It does take dev resource to make it away from progressing the end game. But if anything, they could recycle most of the content assets and smartly pull the key moments together. It does take resource, don't get me wrong, but it celebrates the good work done to date, and it really brings those story arcs to life, setting up players for the next stage of content, allowing new players to catch up on lore in a holistic way whilst leveling or just genuinely having casual fun, playing through a story in an MMORPG environment. The more players you have, you know, increasing the buzz and talking about what is happening in the world, I think the higher player retention you're going to have and more enjoyment players are going to have in that world. There is nothing better, you know, even in like business team environments, your work environments, there's nothing better than having a common goal to kind of rally around, right? And understanding what the heck is going on together. And in the, you know, gameplay absolutely is number one for me. How fun is the gameplay? Number one. But having these other things to really connect you to the world makes a big difference. Together with thousands of other players. And with the Lich King instance or other kind of instances, yeah, I mean, it's a nostalgic hit. That's naturally going to bring players back or want players to play through that for that nostalgic hit. And there are other ways to motivate players, you know, provide them some rewards that make sense in the current state of the game. That's the end of today's video. Let me know what you think. Make sure to like and subscribe for future content. And until next time, keep progressing, and I'll see you in the next video.